Welcome back to Political Paradigms. It's Toby and Theo with you, and I know it's been a couple of weeks, Theo. Would you say the government is sort of falling apart in our absence? Is this because of us?
Yes, all because of us.
Our absence has caused great political instability. Right, where to start? So, I guess politically, all roads lead to the Rwanda policy now. Robert Jenrick has resigned. The government is sort of staking, I guess, its entire reputation and fate on the fate of the Rwanda policy and its implementation. Would that be fair to say, Theo?
It seems like it now. They haven't been really latching onto anything else. It's the one big thing dividing them. So yeah.
And this is the interesting thing, because this is a policy that the government itself only thinks has a 50% chance of working should it go into law. And it going into law is, again, looking like an uphill climb. We've got votes on Tuesday the 12th, which look like it will probably sail through. But then it's all the amendment votes in the new year where the government could genuinely sort of lose the confidence of the House of Commons on a number of different measures. So it looks like a period of acute political instability awaits. And at the same time, it looks like heading into the new year, you could see wages continuing to outpace inflation, prices sort of coming down essentially, and at the same time some positive economic stories, semi-positive, and positive educational figures have come out. So why is the government talking about the one issue where everything's falling apart? Why are they're sort of messing up their own narrative, right?
I think maybe they're just not ready to let it go. I mean, that was like, I guess one of Sunak's expected or hopeful big wins was like, the Rwanda policy. And I guess defying the Supreme Court is something that appeals to the right of the party. If you can still, draw those lines and, pushing through legislation to show the Supreme Court who's boss. I don't know, maybe he still thinks that that would be a popularity win. There's not really much else he could claim, massive success for. I mean, yeah, there's been incremental improvements in other areas, but nothing substantial enough to shore up his electoral performance.
Now, this is a question that I have thoughts on, but I'll put it to you, Theo. Is banging on about this and exacerbating this as sort of a main issue heading into the election, is this a net positive, a net negative, or net neutral for the Conservative Party?
I'd say a net negative because A, the immigration situation under them is still, you know, not what they want it to be. And B, their solution has been defeated once. And C, their new solution to that solution is being criticized by everybody. Almost nobody likes it. Either they disagree with their own policy on moral grounds or they don't think it goes far enough. So most certainly a net negative.
I did see someone saying this, and it was like Sunak's in the middle ground. It's like opposite Goldilocks. Like for some people, this is, it's not hot enough. For some, it's too hot. No one likes it. It's like this is the middle ground of people who are enthusiastic about Rishi Sunak and James Cleverly's specific fudge is basically nil, because it's either too against international law or it's too sort of devoted to international law, and it's too soft or it's too harsh, and it's just an absolute nightmare for them. I think on balance it's probably net neutral. My reasoning behind this is, yes, doing this is basically having a Brexit effect without any of the benefits, right? You're not galvanising, sort of uniting people around a wedge issue that divides Labour, but you are dividing your own party. You found a wedge issue that divides your own party, and Labour are just sort of on the sidelines, not in the conversation, reaping the benefits of your divisions. The only thing is, I think if the government didn't talk about immigration at all, which would avoid bringing up the divisions, that would probably be even worse for them, because it would sort of cede all the ground on immigration to either Labour or Reform or both. Labour would very quickly start going, why isn't the government talking about immigration? So I think it's probably net neutral, only in the sense of this approach is destroying them, but would every other approach destroy them even more?
Yeah, I guess in the sense that every other approach would be even more net negative than this.
Yeah.
I guess another way you could just say it is there is no net neutral, there's only bad.
There is
Just
only net negative.
I mean, I feel like yes, this kind of situation was a lot of Sunak did make a lot of poor strategic decisions, but to an extent, a lot of this was quite thrust upon him. I can't help but feel a little bit bad that the circumstances left by his predecessors in the Tory party were this bad.
Yeah, and it's kind of been like all the ghosts coming home to roost. You've got like the Liz Truss economic ghost, because even if the economy improves, I think the big thing weighing down the government is going to be sort of that Truss moment has damaged any credibility. So when the economy improves, if it does, and we have an election towards the end of 2024, people will still be like, well, we don't really trust you to keep the economy good, so we'll probably give Labour a chance anyway. That's the ghost of
Yeah,
Truss.
yeah. Truss's ghost. I mean, like, if I ask you now, when you think of Truss's premiership, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
I mean, I think of the polling numbers we're seeing right now. I think that's the biggest political
Supposed
impact.
Toby, you're supposed to say lettuce. Everyone thinks of the lettuce.
Oh,
That's the you ruined it.
I'm too geeky. I think of like the macroeconomic
You're not
conditions.
supposed to give me an actual answer.
No, you're right. It's but would you say for the average member of the public, it's the lettuce?
Yes, absolutely. No, no, no. Without a doubt. You look on TV, anyone talking about trust. Oh, lettuce. I mean, that's it.
I think you're right. I want to do. You know how they do word clouds for politicians? Do you think word cloud for Liz Truss? There'd be like big lettuce in the middle now.
It'd be like lettuce and then inflation, unemployment on the side.
Collapse, chaos, incompetence. Word.
Mini budget.
Swear words, lots of swear words. Because I remember, I think they did get David Cameron, and it came up with a C word when they did like words people associated. So I'm sure there'd be a lot of swear words. Yeah. So there's that, and then the ghost of Johnson. I guess Rwanda is kind of the ghost of Priti Patel, isn't it? Because they've thrown this hot potato at Sunak. He's doubled down on it. It's not working, and none of the original sort of instigators of the policy are being held responsible for the policy not working.
Yeah, absolutely. And that plus the credibility, damage.
Yeah, and the big thing for the Tories now is they're being viewed as ineffective, incompetent, stuff like that. And I guess failure to get this through just makes that look even worse. And sort of wrangling around. Do we talk right? I'm gonna leave an open goal here so Theo can sort of kick this ball at me. But I was very skeptical when Theo started talking about leadership contests a few weeks ago. I was more skeptical than I was on air. Off air, I was very much like, that's not going to happen. Theo, did you manifest something? Because suddenly Westminster is sort of awash with talk of Sunak going in the new year. What's going on? How did you know?
Oh, just this briefing I was given access to. It's only for like members of the press, very high level members of the press. We were given it. I guess you wouldn't have got it, but yeah. I Secrets out, guys. I was briefed. I was tipped off.
Did you just have like a spidey sense that Sunak was in a lot of trouble within the Conservative Party?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you just got to think of like situations like this. Either they wear off, but I saw the way things were being piled on.
Yeah.
It is the chickens coming home to roost. There's no way that this isn't gonna, end in chaos. And honestly, look, historically, leaders have been able to weather these kinds of events. But if you think about the amount of exposure people have to politics now, the 24-hour news cycle, it's much harder to overcome issues like this. And it's the nature of this. So big Supreme Court decisions, legislative division, deadlock in Parliament. These are the types of things that bring governments down. It's not just, scandals or this person said this or cabinet reshuffle, that did play a role too. And also big beasts in the party breaking away, like Braverman, if you can even call her that, but things of that nature very much contributed to Theresa May's downfall.
She's like a lightweight beast, I guess.
Yeah,
I,
yeah. I mean, if the party even has beasts anymore, I guess she'd be one of them.
yeah, none of them. But the Prime Minister isn't a big beast. The only big beast left is David Cameron, and he's quite a tame big beast, I suppose. So like it's all a bit damp squib, isn't it?
Mm.
But I've heard talk of like basically there's a few scenarios. The way I look at it, there are three, and I wrote this in an article yesterday. Not to be a shameless plugger, but I'm gonna give you the three scenarios and get your thoughts. So most likely scenario, in my view, is there is a fudge. The policy probably gets put through in some way. Labour are reluctant to stand in the way of it. It doesn't really do much. Maybe there are a couple of deportations, but that's not actually that likely. So the government bangs on about immigration, tries to make it a wedge issue. There's probably a leadership challenge. Sunak survives the leadership challenge. Election at the end of the year. It's just kind of just the muddling on scenario, right?
Yeah.
Scenario 2 is the scenario that I think is getting more likely. Sunak resigns next year. If he is defeated on a number of key votes in the Commons, he decides, look, gets out the lectern. We all think it's going to be an election. He resigns. We get a more right-wing prime minister. And then probably that hideous, don't scream when I say this, the January 2025 election gets put on the agenda, right? Because new prime minister's going to wait as long as they can. Third scenario, which seems pie in the sky, but I actually think is increasing rapidly.
There's no pie in the sky anymore.
There is no pie in the sky. Sunak decides to call an election on the issue of small boats. An early election sometime in the spring or maybe the late winter, a March 2024 election. Who governs Britain? Get Rwanda done. All that kind of stuff. It maybe slightly mitigates their defeat, but they go down hard. Which of those seems most likely to you, Theo?
Honestly, I think the main important thing you highlight is that where do all these timelines converge? Massive Tory defeat.
They all.
So I would say probably the January 2025 election is the least likely.
Right.
I think with this pace, as he said, my uncanny prediction of a potential leadership contest seemed, out pie in the sky a couple of weeks ago. Now it seems very likely, as would a potentially early election. But
do you think
again,
do you think
speculation?
Do you think the challenge? I agree with you. A challenge is likely. Do you agree with me that the most likely outcome of the challenge is Sunak survives, just much weaker than before?
Yes, I think you're probably right. I mean, again, there's no really big contenders at the moment. Braverman, we thought potentially would be able to launch a challenge straight away, have MPs defect to her side or whatever, but no one really came. It was quite dispassionate, but yes, certainly could be a challenge which would rock the boat a bit more.
Here's the thing, right? So we head into 2024. It's very possible, Theo, that in quick succession next year, we have 3 prime ministers. So like what? Rishi Sunak for a few months, Suella Braverman, or, Suella Braverman, or any other names you want to throw in? Do you know who I've heard people saying? Simon Clarke. Kemi Badenoch. They're really scraping the barrel.
Yeah, she could.
She's kind of an upcoming big beast. She'll be a big beast in about 20 years.
She's a little bit B-Tech Suella Braverman, but
yeah,
I think
she's more substantial than Suella Braverman in a few ways, I suppose. She seems like my prediction about Kemi Badenoch is she'll be a key Tory figure long after Suella Braverman isn't.
Yeah, definitely part of the next generation.
But would you really want to be prime minister for like a tortured 3 months and then lose?
I think honestly, if I was Kemi Badenoch or one of the younger Tories, I'd probably know that it's best to wait out this next decade of political ambiguity and then come back afterwards.
Yeah.
You know what?
Agree.
You know who might want to just kind of get their time in as prime minister because they've been waiting for it so long?
I know who you're going to say.
Who am I going to say?
Just say it, Theo. I know where this is going.
I know you're going to screw it up.
Would it be Monsieur Gove?
It would. It would.
No one's going to... Tory MPs facing annihilation aren't going to go, I know the answer. Michael Gove. No one's going to do that.
They've always done. I mean, look. Just for the fact that if they can just accept defeat and just think, this guy has been at the edge of every single leadership contest for the last 13 years. He's been the, number 2 in every single race, even the number 1 at times. He thwarted Boris Johnson's campaign in 2016. He was so close. Like, Jesus Christ. How do you think he's feeling?
Theo, do you want Gove a little bit? Does a little part of you just want, like, closure on this era of Tory government? And that closure is like 6 months of Gove.
I want to see him in front of number 10. I want to know what that looks like.
This is like You know where we are? This is like when everyone was like having fever dreams, going like, can David Miliband get rid of Gordon Brown before the election? This is sort of end of New Labour government, sort of like fever dreaming, isn't it? Where it's like,
This is very similar.
who is the David Miliband of this? If Rishi Sunak is Gordon Brown, is it? I guess it's like what? So is Suella Braverman David Miliband?
Yeah, I guess if you just mirror it in terms of like degrees of opinion, then yeah, I guess.
But like Suella Braverman in the Tory party is like the Jeremy Corbyn of the Labour Party, so it's not really a good analogy. But do you know who's the David Miliband? David Cameron is the David Miliband. Like back to the roots, moderate figure, but the difference is David Miliband had a chance of deposing Gordon Brown. David Cameron has no chance of winning a leadership contest, does he?
Well, I think again, because we're not ruling anything out, they may think to themselves, well, we've got an election coming up. Pretty much no one wants us in office. Who's the only person who's guaranteed not to lose their seat and therefore would be a good leader for the election? David Cameron, because he doesn't have a seat.
And he would be leader of a non-existent Conservative Party from the Lords.
Can you imagine the Tories just win 0 seats, then it's just Cameron in the Lords?
It would be kind of endgame for, like the sort of poll profs who are like, every election will be won by like the most moderate person. There's some truth to that, not always, but like their like worst case scenario is David Cameron comes leader and is just crushed, utterly annihilated, and like their whole worldview sort of collapses around them as that happens. They're like, what? I thought moderate sort of Cameronism would win. But no, I don't know. Keir Starmer versus David Cameron. How does that pan out, Theo?
Sounds very early 2010s to me.
It does. I feel
Because
like,
I don't know, can Keir Starmer really go for like, the austerity agenda and things? I mean, there are a lot more two sides of the same coin, I feel like.
I mean, Keir Starmer kind of is signed up to the austerity agenda now, isn't he? In some ways, he's sort of been promising big cuts and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, and Keir Starmer's main, attack point has been just the disgrace that the governments of the last 3 years have been.
Yeah.
Cameron's policies are very controversial, but in terms of, personal disgracement and, such a desecrated record and, things he said and breaking his own laws and things like that, there's just none of that with Cameron.
Yeah. I think Cameron's problem would be like half the party turning on him. Like in terms of presenting, look, we're stable. I guess it might sort of mitigate their problems slightly.
Yeah, I mean, but it tells you all you need to know that we're talking about a potential Cameron government for the second time.
Like, you wouldn't stake your life on that not happening, would you? Because I would.
No, I would not feel safe. I would be looking over my shoulder.
Yeah, it's like if I'd said that to you in 2019, would you stake your life on David Cameron not being Prime Minister again? You would, wouldn't you? You'd be like, of course.
Absolutely.
Course. Anything could happen now. Gove could be in with a shot, Suella Braverman. Kemi Badenoch could be Prime Minister within like 6 months. Crazy.
We could have a leadership contest, Kemi Badenoch versus David Cameron.
I mean, that's a Kemi Badenoch landslide. I say she cracks 85% in that situation if it goes to the membership.
Yeah.
Write it down now, kids. They'd both be too moderate for the Conservative membership.
That is a good point. I mean, that minority of voters that really has determined so much of this country's fate. I mean, Sunak still hasn't fought an election. We've gone 2 Tory prime ministers without an election being fought. That's also, I think, something that could weigh in on voters' minds. They've been ruling without a mandate, pretty much.
That wrangles me, actually. If Sunak resigns and 2 prime ministers, if the country doesn't get to pass judgment on Sunak or Truss, there's something going wrong there, isn't there? That would be without precedent.
Yeah, and even Johnson, if you think about it, Johnson's elected purely for Brexit. Once Brexit's over, and with COVID, his government takes a completely different direction, which is definitely not mandated. So essentially, we've had 3 unmandated prime ministers. If you think of Johnson before COVID and Johnson after COVID as different people, which,
He basically scrapped the whole sort of big spending levelling up thing quite quickly, didn't he? And then his mandate was gone. Heading to 2021, he was like, nah, we're going to start reversing policy. Operation Red Meat is when that died off, wasn't it? He was like, we're actually going to be right wing now instead of sort of. He was trying to be like sort of Michael Heseltine for a while, wasn't he? And he just sort of undid it all. My hot take for the Conservative Party is It's too late now. The winning strategy would be get like Penny Mordaunt as prime minister and implement like the full leveling up white paper. So go full Michael Heseltine, big spending. Penny Mordaunt sort of looks competent, not associated with any of the factions, and do like the reducing legal migration policies that they're putting in. Scrap Rwanda, just go with that. I think that's their best face for the public, if you know what I mean.
And then maybe they crack 100 seats.
Exactly, Theo. That's a good scenario. Yeah, this.
Look, it's damage control, isn't it?
Let me pull up I think it was the 1993 Canadian election. Are you familiar with this, Theo?
I am not familiar with the 1993 Canadian election. No.
These can't get the staff, can you?
Oh, you absolute nerd.
Let me find it. Where is this? Oh, am I wrong? I think it's is it the 90? It is the 90.
Yeah, I'll just ask ChatGPT.
Yeah, it's the 93. Oh, yes. So, in the 1988 election, the Progressive Conservatives had a majority, okay? They had 169 seats, and you only need 148 for a majority. Labour had 83, and sort of the New Democrats had 43. In 1993, here's what happened. The Conservatives went down to 16% of the vote and ended up with 2 seats. And
So there is historical precedent for something like this.
People are now saying that our politics is going to resemble that. And like a new party to the right-ish got like 50 seats. The Liberals on only 40% of the vote, just completely cleaned up. A party called Reform got 50 seats. Which was a right-wing populist party. So a right-wing populist party got about 50 seats, and the Tories just completely destroyed themselves. Not impossible, right?
No, and I think it's a good point you make. Yeah, there would probably be like more of a right-wing party take the place. I mean, I feel like honestly, the two big powerful forces currently at play is like moderate liberal left Labour and far right Tory. But if you have a party like Reform, which is essentially far right Tory without all the scandals and disgracement, that is most of political discourse. That maybe the Conservative Party is not fit for purpose, and so but you know, right wing sentiment is still there. There's still a lot of people who believe in, well, you know, right wing stuff. So they've got to have someone to vote for.
You're completely right. I think lots of the country are right wing, but barely anyone is a Tory. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, that's where we are now,
and
right?
Once they diverge, there's no Toryism anymore.
I think that is the risk for the Tories. I've got this Daily Mail article by Dan Hodges, who's quite well sourced in sort of what internal Tories are saying. I mean, a lot of the stuff in here is batshit. Like a Tory MP saying, we need to install Priti Patel as a caretaker, win the election, and then bring back Johnson. It's like, none of those things are going to happen. The idea that caretaker Prime Minister Priti Patel would beat Keir Starmer is a new one to me.
And then Johnson coming back. I'm sure he likes his cushy new GB News job too much to do that.
Yeah. But the Reform Party are quoted in this article. And I'm hearing a lot from Reform at the moment. And it's basically that he wants to kick the Tory party sort of to the curb for good. It says, when Nigel gets back to Britain, he'll start dominating. This is from Reform. He'll start dominating the agenda. Within 6 to 8 weeks, we'll be polling in the high teens, and the Tories will start to slip below 20%. At that point, between 5 and 10 MPs will realise the game is up and defect to us. And it'll be game over. We're looking at the last majority Tory administration of our lifetime. We, as in the Reform Party, are going to destroy them. And that's what they want. The Reform Party want to destroy the Tory party.
That's plausible. That's really plausible. And I'd like to draw an analogy here, honestly.
Okay.
If you think about the threat posed to the Tory party by Reform, the Brexit party in 2019, it was Brexit, right?
Yeah.
And that was a big threat. But two things happened. The Tory party had credibility on Brexit.
Exactly.
To get Brexit done agenda, which was assisted by Brexit party stepping aside. Now, the issue is now immigration stopping the boats. The Tories have no credibility on that, and Reform is showing no signs of stepping aside. So what you outlined is very plausible. And then if you also add into the equation 3 years of disgraced records and their current polling numbers, that seems like a very plausible outcome.
Do you think it's time to start considering the possibility that the Reform Party replaces the Tories as the official opposition? Like, maybe not this cycle, but in 2028, if the Tories are completely wiped off the map.
I think that's something we could see. Again, I don't think it's going to happen overnight, but I
No.
think we could definitely see some reform candidates in Parliament. I mean, Nigel Farage, has been keeping up his presence with his cameo videos and GB News and everything like that. He's definitely still part of the picture.
It's just fascinating, right? Because you don't see... I know that lots of people on the left do not hate Keir Starmer, but there is not a major political force that is on the left going, we want to destroy Labour, wipe them off the map, maximise a Tory win. Like, the Greens are attacking Labour, but they're not saying, we want Labour off the map. They're saying, we want a non-Tory government that will have to be Labour-led. Reform are saying, we want to completely obliterate the Conservatives, maximise Labour's win, and then take the fight to Labour like 5 years later. That is unprecedented, right? That's crazy.
Yeah.
And that's the wild card, I think. Because I don't think any of us think Keir Starmer is a political titan. But if you've got Keir Starmer and Labour sort of just sat there, like, mopping up votes, and then on the other side, the Tory vote splits in half, that's 1993 Canadian federal election, baby. That is, it's all over.
I mean, like you say, he's not a political titan. Essentially, I'm not saying Keir Starmer's, a bad statesman or anything, but he's essentially been sitting here while the Tory party self-combusts and reaping up, all the electoral benefits. They haven't fully combusted yet, and slowly more people are realizing that, whatever agenda they want doesn't come through the Tory party. There hasn't really been a political force to fill that space. That space does exist. So, yeah, we could be Canada in 1993.
Just looking at this here. Kim Campbell was leader of the Conservative Party and Prime Minister from June to November 1993, when she lost her seat and all but 2 seats were lost for the Conservatives. Is that Suella Braverman after becoming Prime Minister next year?
Okay, I think we're going a bit too into it with the parallels. Not everything has to have a parallel.
Yeah, everything is all roads. Everything is the 1993 Canadian federal election.
You could always make a 40-minute video essay about it.
I feel it cooking, Theo. I'm gonna have to write like an essay, like a 15,000 word essay about this.
Watch this space, guys.
Watch this space. So, I don't know what your thoughts are on this coming week. Do you think reports that they'll probably get the initial vote sort of clear are right? Or do you think Sunak could face his reckoning now as opposed to in the new year?
I don't think they'll get vetoed. I think, there's enough. I mean, it's not like anyone doesn't not want to deal with it. But again, in terms of how this affects him politically, it's not going to help him. I mean, in terms of, by the time it comes into effect, it's not really changing the law. It's attempting to change the truth by changing the law. And that's a legal gray area, essentially. And whether the Supreme Court, whether the Supreme Court, will then act differently about that, whether other courts will get involved. It's a constitutional crisis upcoming. So I'm not saying he's going to pass the bill and curb immigration straight away. But, I'm also not saying that it's going to be vetoed by the Tory party.
There's a clip here from Sky News, and it was Sophie Ridge and Sam Coates talking about the next election. It's about 3 minutes long. They sort of cover a lot of the ground that we've been covering. I'm going to play this now, and we can sort of give our thoughts to it, because they talk about, I was sort of watching this at the time. I was like, they're talking about Sunak resigning, like that's very likely. And that kind of shocked me. So I'm going to play this now, so sort of sit back and enjoy.
Now, Sam put out a tweet today that really put the cat among the pigeons, where he said that he thinks the chances of a January 2025 election are slowly rising. So I need to find out what on earth is going on here. Because, Sam, I'll put it out to you first. My thesis of the last few days has been that actually the chances of a spring election have gone up because, if Rishi Sunak can't get legislation through, if he can't command the authority he needs to get his MPs on side, then the whole thing could blow up. He might be forced to effectively call an election. You only have to look at, Boris Johnson, Liz Truss, Theresa May to realise that, getting legislation through, if they can't do it, if it's sticky, that's what leads to the end of premiership. So that was my thought. You think he's going to go long? Explain yourself.
It's an interesting thesis. I think I'm right. Look, I believe that the odds of a January 2025 election are rising right now. Look, I just think, not dissimilar to your basic thought, that there is a sharply escalating chance that this government gets stuck, right? It just can't get anything through. And maybe that's on the migration bill that I was just talking about, maybe on something else. Right, it takes just 29 MPs, Tory MPs, to block legislation. Now, if you can remember back as far as Monday, 50 Tory MPs didn't obey a 3-line whip, and 99 of them abstained on various bits of legislation. So, like, the numbers of rebelling MPs are
You're
there.
making my argument here.
Yeah, but my point is, look at the state of the Tory party. So if you tell me that that's not going to happen soon, right, at that point, what happens, right? Does Sunak bend, or does he call an election at the point where he's losing the legislative agenda and he's 20 points behind in the polls? That is annihilation. He will want to go, potentially, with the threat of letters hanging over him, with dignity. So what does he do? He doesn't bend, he doesn't change course. That's not him. That's not how he fought the leadership contest. He just decides, either because he knows he's going to be ousted on his own terms, that he's going to go. A sort of dignified flounce, as it were. I just think that there is a appreciable chance that early in 2024, we have a new Prime Minister, right? And because of that, that person will not want to give up the job straight away. And they'll think, I'm here in office, I want to use a few months, maybe I'll get a summit in Washington, I want to, turn things around. I'm going to use the time that I have in Downing Street to show why I'm the best Prime Minister of the 5 in this Parliament. And the last moment they could go for an election, well, that's January the 28th, 2025. So because of the numbers, and because you can't lose your legislative programme and be behind in the polls and then call an election, I think we might be waiting for a long time indeed.
We're living in a nightmare. Theo, your thoughts?
I mean, he pretty much just copied our entire argument from a few podcasts ago about how 2025 may happen. So, yeah, go listen to that.
Yeah, we're so ahead of the curve, aren't we, Theo? I mean, Theo, you were talking about leadership contests and new prime ministers before anyone in the Westminster Village. You beat them.
Oh my God, yeah. They called me, in the mainstream media, they called me tinfoil hat. They called me Chicken Little. They called me Doomster. And look at me now. And now I've been silenced. That's why I only got 50 views on the last podcast. They're trying to censor me.
They're trying to shut us. Team Sunak is trying to shut us down. I think we've just about covered everything, really. I mean, it's going to be a big week next week. It's probably going to be relatively underwhelming, although watch this space. Also interesting to see if the government slides a bit more in the polls with all this news. I don't know what's going to happen, really. Theo, any closing thoughts on sort of Endgame for Rishi Sunak? I mean, this is a political figure that was the most popular prime minister in the country, became prime minister in unenviable circumstances, was probably the first person to ever get a second crack at being prime minister, sort of 2 months after sort of flopping the first time. And he's now sort of spent the year making every mistake you could possibly make, to the point where less Conservative voters are saying they'll vote Conservative than were at the end of Liz Truss's premiership. Theo, your thoughts on Sunak, a diminished and wounded political figure?
I want to talk directly to Sunak. People will like you if you give them free food, but they won't like you when you mismanage the economy for an entire year, among various other miscellaneous political disasters which you conjure up and exacerbate.
The thing I was thinking, he just seems like such a small political figure. I don't mean literally, but when you see him speak, he is
like 5'6".
He's not commanding authority, is he? Like, I feel like office has made him seem like a smaller figure. During the pandemic, he seemed like a towering sort of figure of authority.
Yeah, he really did. And it was kind of like, Johnson, he's a bit of a bumbling idiot, in the public eye. That was kind of what people thought about him. And then Sunak was like this numbers guy from Goldman Sachs who was like going to fix up the economy and blah, 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 or whatever. But I think, when he kind of has to expound on that capacity and do all the other roles of prime minister, he's shown himself to be, at best, slightly incapable. And I'm not sure how this is, personally affecting him, but he does seem quite affected by his perceived decrease in power. He's definitely not squaring up, to challenges and things like that in his speeches.
How do you feel about extending today's podcast and doing a next Tory Prime Minister draft, which is where we'll each pick 3, and we'll see whose stacks up better, and we'll get people to sort of vote in the comments section.
We could do what they do on the FT podcast. I mean, since they copied us, we can copy them. They do a political stock pick every week. You buy and sell like a politician who you think is going to go up or down.
I like the sound of that. Okay, so in terms of Prime Minister or just generally?
Why don't we keep it to like the Tory party for now?
Okay. So Tory politicians in the next 6 months, buy or sell?
I'm gonna buy Kemi Badenoch.
You're buying okay. I would also buy Kemi Badenoch. Suella Braverman, I'm actually going to sell. I'm not confident that she's going to benefit that much from any trouble Sunak's in.
Okay.
How do you feel on Braverman?
I think I agree. I mean, if she was going to benefit from the Sunak chaos, it would have been right when she resigned. That was the time to ride her wave. She's probably immensely disappointed when that didn't go as well as she thought it would. She thought it was going to be kind of like walk away from the explosion moment, but the explosives failed to detonate.
Yeah, it was faulty explosives. I'm buying Cameron, and I'm selling Sunak.
Okay.
I think Sunak's in big trouble, and I was reading in the Times yesterday. Apparently, like, Cameron is just dominating in cabinet meetings, and people sort of see him as the only figure of stature. So just by default, he's now like the most substantial politician in the cabinet.
Mm. No, I can imagine that. I mean, also just because these people are all they're all trembling in their seats because they might literally lose their seats. They're trembling, and he's all there in the House of Lords, expertise, wisdom coming in. Right, guys, here's how it's done.
Exactly.
You clearly don't know how to govern.
Exactly. Any final thoughts on politicians? Anyone else you want to buy or sell?
I'll also sell my share in Sunak.
It had to be done. I'm sorry, Sunak. It's over. Are you? But I'll do one honourable mention for Labour. Buy or sell Keir Starmer.
I guess I'll just top up my stock a little bit. Nothing major, but he's still heading towards a big victory. I think it's a foregone conclusion now.
It's easy money. Always buy Keir Starmer these days.
Yeah.
All right, Theo, thank you for joining me, and I'll see you in the next week, really, for another, unless anyone resigns, for another look at a increasingly unstable and complex British political landscape.
See you then.